say a very warm welcome to our briefing this evening. I'm Martin Lee, I chair the National Deaneries Network. We have Tug John Wilson there, who also member of the Deaneries Network, who is going to, with Tim, who's behind the puzzle, going to look after all our technical things tonight. So they are our experts. So if you have any technical difficulties, sending a chat thing to Tug and Tim, and they will sort you out. And Phil as well as our secretary. So it's lovely to have you here with us this evening. And a very, very warm welcome to Becca and to Caroline from the Clewer Institute. We're really very delighted you're with us this evening. And so thank you both very much indeed. You'll be pleased to know you're not going to listen to me talk very much, but it's just lovely to welcome you. And I'll just start with prayer and then hand you over, if I may, to Becca. Tomorrow being the presentation of Christ in the temple, a collect then for the eve of the presentation. So let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, clothed in majesty, whose beloved Son was this day presented in the temple, in substance of our flesh, grant that we may be presented to you with pure and clean hearts, by your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Okay. So Becca, Caroline, thank you very much. We're very much in your hands as you lead us through. Can I just say to everyone, the time during this evening to stop for a quick pop the loo and a bit of coffee. So that just let you know there will be a short break time. But Caroline, Becca, we're in your hands, and thank you very much indeed for being with us this evening.
No worries. Just a quick tech question. Is there any way of switching off the beep when someone enters the room or not? If there is, fine. If there isn't, don't worry. So I'm Becca Fowle. I work doing consultancy work for the Clewer Initiative half the week, and I'm a Darson safeguarding advisor the other week, the other half of the week even, in Gloucester. I don't know if you have any Gloucester people here today. I'll share my screen in a minute, but Caroline, I thought it best to introduce ourselves before we start sharing. So should I hand over to you to introduce yourself?
Thank you. So I'm Caroline Virgo. I'm the director of the Clewer Initiative full-time, and very pleased to be here with you this evening. So thank you very much for asking us.
Thank you. So I'll share the slides. We will share a copy of the slides with the National Deaneries Network for them to put on the website and distribute with you. So don't worry too much about making notes as we go along. So we thought it is useful to talk about what can Deaneries do about modern slavery. So that's the title of our presentation this evening. We'll do questions kind of right at the end, but do, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we can either try and answer them or we'll kind of park them until the end if that's okay. So in terms of housekeeping, I think you guys are used to doing stuff on Zoom. That's how you can meet nowadays. So hopefully and that you know who to go for tech, so we don't need to do that bit. We'll cover the aim in a second. We use some illustrations by Bill Crook. So this is his illustration throughout the Clewer stuff. In terms of health warning, it's really good practice whenever we're talking about safeguarding to try not to think about it as something that happens to other people, and the same with modern slavery. So do look after yourselves during this session. We will be sharing some stories from some actors talking about stories that people themselves have been through. So if they're not too graphic, but we don't know what your journeys are or what might touch you. So do look after yourselves during the session. That might mean taking a short break or switching your camera off, phoning a friend, or looking after yourself in another way. So yeah, just bear that in mind. We always do a health warning and safeguarding training. It is really important. So the aims for today are to learn a bit more about modern slavery in the UK, to think about who it affects and how big the numbers are. It is quite a hidden issue, so the numbers are difficult to kind of get accurate figures on, but we'll share as much as we can around that. Thinking about the role of the church and the Clewer Initiative and how the Clewer Initiative can support you in your roles in deaneries, to recognise, respond, record and refer. So we use those 4 Rs because that's the kind of go-to in terms of safeguarding. Modern slavery is a form of abuse, for children and for adults. And we don't want to make this a kind of extra burden for you, but something to fit in to your normal safeguarding practice. I'm sure you've all done safeguarding training through the Church of England, and they use those 4 R's. So just helping to kind of hang it on a system that you know already is always helpful. I'm thinking about how you as a deanery network, as a group and as individuals, can help the Clewer initiative to tackle modern slavery. So that's what we're going to be going through today. I'm going to hand over to Caroline and we're going to watch a short film. Do you want me to play this, Caroline? Do you want to talk first?
I'm going to talk very briefly, first of all, if that's all right. Thank you. We thought what might be helpful, first of all, I mean, as well as talking about safeguarding during this presentation, we would also like to sort of make you more aware of some of the wider issues around modern slavery. And so we have got a few films and case studies that they're all very short, which we're going to show you. And so we would like to begin with this film, which talks a little bit about Clewer and about the role of the church in tackling modern slavery. So Becca, if you could play the video, please.
The Clewer Initiative is the national work of the Church of England to combat modern slavery and exploitation. We were set up in 2016 following the Modern Slavery Act being agreed in 2015. We are funded by the Clewer Sisters, who are an order of Anglican nuns who donate generously to causes related to the eradication of human trafficking. Our key goal is to reduce the prevalence of modern slavery in our communities. Based on our belief that the tools to tackle modern slavery lie within communities, we work with local churches and communities to build resilience and support vulnerable groups. The church, present in all communities and at the heart of many, has a primary responsibility in leading efforts to combat modern slavery. We also work at a national and international level through a range of partnerships, raising awareness and developing practical tools and resources for use by churches, communities, partners, and the public. Partnership is one of our core principles, and we collaborate not only within the Church of England, but also with law enforcement, local government, charities, and wider faith networks. Locally, we are working in communities with small groups of volunteers. These groups are called hidden voices. We help our groups to look at the risks and resources in their community. We explore together how they can help to prevent modern slavery and identify and support the victims. We have developed innovative solutions helping to address the issue of modern slavery. Our Safe Car Wash app helps motorists identify and report modern slavery and exploitation at hand car washes. We have also created a range of successful online courses and training resources to help teach appropriate groups about specific areas of modern slavery and community resilience. To find out more about our work and how to get involved, please visit our website, www.theclewerinitiative.org.
Thank you very much, Becca. Could we see the next slide now, please? So just to reiterate some of the messages in that film, we are the national work of the Church of England to combat modern slavery. And we're very privileged to be situated in the Archbishop's Council and to actually work from Lambeth Palace. That's happened since the pandemic, and it's actually very exciting to be in there. So we exist to raise awareness and to mobilise the church and communities to take action against modern slavery. We also try to work with people to promote victim identification, which is often sort of, I suppose, a more detailed form of awareness raising. And then finally, we work mostly with other organisations to help them provide victim care and support to people who are either at risk of modern slavery or people who are exiting modern slavery. So the sort of things we do, we've got lots of bespoke training. And in fact, that's been one of our most successful offers. We developed it during the pandemic. and seem to be running a huge range of courses that are very well attended. We also do awareness raising campaigns. So we have sort of ongoing campaigns that we call our business as usual ones, which would be things like the Safe Car Wash app. And then we've got ones that we run for a period of time. So we've just released a piece of work for Lent, which we'll talk about at the end of this video, which we would consider as a campaign for a short period of time. We have got innovative tools. I mentioned the Safe Car Wash app. We've got a farm work welfare app as well, and we're hoping that we will be able to do a nail bar app with the beauty industry at some stage this year. We're just looking at how much it's going to cost and who might be our partners in it. And finally, we work really hard to be able to resource the church and to resource people who might be interested in doing modern slavery work. So we have all sorts of things to, I suppose, help people understand and to raise awareness. So films, posters, leaflets. There's a safeguarding course which you can access. And the whole sort of sum of that comes under our Hidden Voices course, where we're encouraging communities to really take action and also to build communities. So just very briefly to talk about the Hidden Voices course, it's there as a community mobilisation based course. So I have a long-standing background in working with communities and getting communities to think about pieces of work that they can do of all sorts, and then to develop them and to contextualise them, I suppose, for their own communities. And it's one of the things that I'm very interested in and like to do. And so this Hidden Voices course is for that. And actually, I think some of you were here at the beginning, heard me talk to Chris Elliott. His deanery has got an extremely successful sort of iteration of Hidden Voices, which I'm sure that he could talk to everybody about, which has spread out far beyond his deanery and has become probably one of our most interesting sort of pieces of work. Well, it's not our piece of work anymore, it's very firmly Chris's and his steering group. And so I think if it's okay, Becca, we could go on to the next slide now, please. So we've told you a bit about ourselves, and what I think I would now like to do is to give you some definitions. So modern slavery encompasses slavery, human trafficking, servitude, forced or compulsory labour. And the sort of legal definition makes it clear that traffickers and slave masters use whatever means they have at their disposal to coerce, to deceive, and to force individuals into a life of abuse, servitude, and inhumane treatment. And I think one of the most, I was going to say interesting, that's a bad use of the word really, but over the period that I've been involved in this agenda, the modern slavery agenda, which is since about 2013, I think that we developed a much more sophisticated understanding of it, because we can see that very often modern slavery, it isn't an absolute, that we can see people sort of moving gradually towards it. Sorry, Becca, I've gone off script a little bit, haven't I? Apologies. I'll stop on this slide for a moment. So people can be really very seriously and graphically enslaved, and that those were a lot of the images that we were seeing in 2013, 2014. Now we tend to think about it as much more of a sort of gradual, perhaps less severe process, and hopefully some of that will come out during this presentation. Next slide, please. So just to, I suppose, refine a little bit the definition of modern slavery, it has to have three different aspects to it. So we have one of action or movement. So it's the movement of a person from one place to another into conditions of exploitation. Then there has to be some sort of means or control. So using deception, coercion, force, or the abuse of power, or the abuse of someone's vulnerability. And I think, you know, this point about someone's vulnerability is a very important point, because it can often look as though a victim or potential victim has actually chosen to do something, when in fact they've somehow, you know, been backed into a corner because things are so very difficult for them. And again, we'll explore this a bit further during the presentation. And the purpose is always exploitation. So those are the legal definitions, and we can summarize them, which we do sometimes, by saying tricked, trapped, and traded. Next slide, please, Becca. So this is an animation that we use a fair bit, and it sort of explains about modern slavery, and also begins to explore what we can do to help tackle it as individuals. Thank you, Becca.
Modern slavery is invisible. It lives among us, within our communities, but often hidden to our eyes. Maybe the guy who cleans your building, the person who does your nails. It could be a neighbor, a classmate. It could be me. We are invisible because one day, someone made us a promise, and we believed it. They promised us a decent job.
Friendship, status, a sense of belonging.
A better life, a hopeful future.
Good money, a place to live.
Then, all of a sudden, they make those dreams disappear, and they hurt us, threaten our loved ones.
They steal our documents, control our bank accounts. They steal our freedom and choice, make us feel worthless, hopeless, invisible.
They take away who we are and make someone new, forcing us to serve.
Traffic and deal.
To labor in farms and factories.
To sell our bodies.
24 hours a day on call, no time off.
Working for a tiny wage, paid in cash or no wage at all.
We can't go far. We owe them money. We have to shut up, not say a word.
That's how we turn invisible.
We don't want our friends, relatives to know that we live like this.
We are too scared, too desperate, too poor.
Too ashamed to speak up.
We don't want to see ourselves as slaves, to recognize that someone is making a good profit out of us, that we got trapped in a situation we cannot escape.
So we become invisible, tiny, microscopic. We are here though. We can be seen again, become visible. The spell can be broken in the simplest of ways, but it's not abracadabra. It can be, how are you? Who are you living with? What are your plans for the weekend? What dreams are you chasing?
So hope the resources that we've shown so far, you'll get a PDF of the slides, and all of them are available on the Clewer website. And I think we always think that's a great film clip to show that really gets across modern slavery and actually how we can all do something about it by noticing what's going around us and asking those kind of questions of people. So hopefully a good introduction to that. We're using Bill's images again to think about the different types of exploitation. So we've got forced marriage, financial exploitation, domestic servitude on the top line, and then forced labour, organ harvesting, sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, and debt bondage on the second line. So lots of different ways that people can be exploited in a modern slavery situation. So in the UK, the main forms of exploitation are these four, so criminal exploitation being the top way that children are exploited. So you may have heard of the term county lines, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on, but that comes under criminal exploitation and is the most common way that children are exploited. Labour exploitation, so people working in nail bars, for example, car washes, paving driveways, those sort of construction industry, those sorts of things. Sexual exploitation, often behind closed doors, pop-up brothels, and domestic servitude, again, more difficult to see because people are hidden in other people's homes. So we know that exploitation and coerced criminality increased and continues to increase. So when we look at the statistics that are reported every quarter, we see that every quarter the numbers are going up and up, and a part of that is around more people being able to recognise these things, but there's also definitely an increase linked often to kind of working conditions that people have. So we're going to watch another short video. We've got some great videos to show that you could be able to share in your settings. So this is a victim story, and this lady was called Hannah. So this is an actor portraying this. So I'll just show this to you.
I came with my husband from Syria in hope of a better life. War is no life. We paid a criminal gang a lot of money to transport us. We came through Cali in the back of a lorry, which was terrifying. We were so relieved to arrive, so full of hope, but we still owed for the journey. We were very vulnerable. We had nowhere to live. We couldn't speak the language. We were in a country with no right to work, but we were desperate to work to pay off our debt. And we were separated from the people we knew. My husband and I were kept apart. And the gang promised us to find us work so we can pay off our debt. They forged the work documents, which cost a lot of money. And my debt kept on growing 10% a week. So I was trapped. I was sent to work in a food factory. My wages taken from me. I couldn't tell my family back home what had happened to me. I was too ashamed of what my life in England had become. I couldn't tell anyone in the factory because I didn't want to get deported. And our exploiters always kept us looking very pristine with decent clothes and silk scarves, makeup. They didn't want us looking like slaves. They were clever. And I took pride in my appearance. I didn't want anyone to know the mess I was in. And so it went on. And one day, my exploiter came to the flat to get my wages, and I challenged him. I didn't want to be a slave. He grabbed me by the neck, he half strangled me, and the next day at work, I broke down. And my employer asked me what was wrong. He could see the marks on my neck. And the truth came out. He helped me escape. He called the police. All I ever wanted was a better life for myself and my family.
That's a powerful watch, but hopefully quite a helpful resource. So Caroline talked about the short awareness raising resources that are available. So that's from the Lent course from last year, and every year there's or the year before rather. So every year there's a new theme and a new Lent course and a series that people can use in their churches and their communities to help raise awareness and to pray and think about these issues. So we'll give you at the very end of the session, we'll give you a bit of a taster as to this year's theme, which is about journeys. And last year's was called Children in the Shadows, and the year before was Women in the Shadows. So taking a different focus and thinking about the issues for people. So they have videos and then discussions and the scripture as well. So a great resource to use in your deaneries. So we've talked about the kind of there is a system for people to go into it in this country called the National Referral Mechanism, and that's a government system for identifying, referring and reporting and supporting victims of modern slavery. So we'll think about the numbers in a minute, but actually it represents kind of the tip of the iceberg. So you can imagine for Hannah, there were lots of reasons why she didn't talk out to start with, and there's many reasons why people don't speak out about what's happening to them, and many reasons why people choose not to go into this system. But for those who do, there is support available. It is quite a long process, and it takes a long time for the decisions to be made about whether or not a person is a victim of modern slavery or human trafficking. So there are around 100,000 victims of exploitation every year in the UK, and then the statistics in terms of they are reported every quarter. So we've got all of the statistics for 2021 and 3/4 of them for 2022. We're just waiting for the last quarter to come out. So thinking about that 100,000 overall figure, actually only 13,000 potential victims went into the system in 2021. And they get support, as I said, from the government, and the government contract the Salvation Army in this country to provide that support, and then that's subcontracted to other organisations. So I think great to see that we've got a Christian organisation working on the front line to support these victims. In terms of ratios, in terms of gender, mostly men. 77% men, 23% female, and that hasn't really changed last year either. In terms of the nationalities going into that system, most commonly UK in 2021, then Albanian, and then Vietnamese. Any thoughts on why the kind of the gender split, or why those why it might be UK nationals at the kind of top of that list? Does anyone want to unmute themselves and share why they think that might be? Let's come on, someone can be brave. If you're wrong, it doesn't matter. Mary?
The UK, because actually, I mean, assuming that, yeah, they have more knowledge of the country. They're not strictly in a foreign country, so they might have more understanding and a slightly more positive outlook.
Yeah, absolutely. So people will have a better understanding of the system, of what work should look like for people, and what kind of work conditions should be, and also maybe more trust in the system. So we know there are some issues with the police in this country, and different groups having a trust in them, but generally they are a trusted organisation, whereas in some countries that's not the case, and there is corruption everywhere. But yeah, so that might be one of the reasons. Vevet, is that a right pronunciation of your name?
Yes, I get it wrong sometimes too. Right. I think one of the reasons why is people see here the law is more fair. If anything goes wrong, they think they have a better chance of a fair trial in this country. So people are more likely to take the risk to come here, and looking at it from that perspective.
Absolutely. And why do you think maybe more men in that system than women? Why do you think that might be? Any thoughts on that, anyone?
Would it be more boys in county lines and more men in forced labour now?
Yeah, so they are,
teenage
yeah, so maybe out and about on the streets where they're more likely to be recognised as being exploited, and women are more likely to be exploited in a more hidden way. So women are more likely to be victims of sexual exploitation or domestic servitude, which is more hidden. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we've got there the adult, I talked earlier about children and adults and the differentiation there. So this is 3/4 of last year. So we can see that kind of in 2021 we had nearly 13,000 victims, and in 3/4 of we've got there half of 2022 we had 8,000. So it is, you know, every quarter is increasing. The stats have remained the same around men and women, but there has been a swap in terms of Albanian people more likely to be in the system than UK nationals. Quite interesting to see the kind of current rhetoric around that from the government around Albanian people and their being maybe less likely in the future to be able to get asylum in this country. Hannah talked about the kind of push factors that made her leave Syria. And so there is a change in terms of nationalities and people coming over here depending on what's going on in that country. So in Eritrea there has been a civil war for a long period of time, and a lot of conscription and forced labour, and very difficult for people to speak out against the government. So maybe that's why that has increased. And again, the same thing in terms of adults and children. Yeah. Thank you. So this just shows us the breakdown by women and men, and we talked about why that might be, and you can see the symbols represent the types of exploitation. So the tool is labour exploitation, the bed is sexual exploitation, the leaf is cannabis farms. So children are often used in cannabis farms and then live there and have to tend the plants as well. So just shows you the breakdown by men and women. I'm going to hand over to Caroline now, if that's all right for the next slide, Caroline.
Thank you very much. So one of the, Becca mentioned that one of the things that's very prevalent in this country is a phenomenon that we call county lines. And hopefully most of you will have an idea of what they are. I mean, it's become very much portrayed in a lot of the police dramas that are on television in the last sort of 12 months or so. But it involves children or young people becoming involved basically in the dealing of drugs and in moving them from one area of the country usually to another area where there's a sort of distribution network that they can their controller can make money out of them. And so we've got this story here that we have in our new resource, which we published for Lent, and well, you'll see from the film that we've tried to make it, I suppose, atypical, and it wouldn't necessarily be somebody or somebody involved in this sort of crime. So should we show the film, Becca? Is that all right?
So I'm just going to go out of this, just 1 second. Sorry, I forgot I had to do this.
So Becca's having to do this because the films have literally just been put out today, and so we haven't had time to embed them in the video.
Do you want me to tell you about what happened? It started at school in year 10. My best subject was English. We'd been reading Frankenstein, which was cool, and got an A in my first essay, which, to be honest, even I was impressed by that. I was never in trouble. I'd go home, see my friends, watch TV, read. I'd seen Diane at school. She was 2 years above me, but she was really pretty. She hung out with her gang a lot, but you never wanted them to notice you in case they didn't like the way you looked. But one day Diane called me over in the playground and my heart was like pounding, but she was like, "You're really pretty. Do you know that?" And I nearly fell over because I'm just really ordinary. I started to hang out with them a lot after that.
She'd like laugh at the things I say and hug me and call me her little sister. And she bought me presents, shoes, earrings. Then one day Diane said she was in real trouble. Would I help her out? And that's how it all started. I didn't know then that Diane was grooming me. That's the word the officer used. Grooming. But it made me feel sick that it was me that it happened to. Diane said, I've got this package, will you take it to a place outside Lincoln? I don't know where that was, but she said, just take a day off school, get the train, I'll buy you the ticket and deliver the package. I didn't want to, but I thought it's just this once. No, but it's never just the once. Diane said that if the police find out what I did, I'd be arrested, so I just have to keep going. They probably won't stop you because you're small and white, so you'll probably be okay. Diane worked for this man. He said, you work for me now. They'd send me where they wanted to and I just have to go. And Mum was like frantic because I just disappear for days and I hardly went to school. I'd look at my old school bag and it was like it belonged to another person. Then one day the police raided the flat I was in, and that's what saved me. They told me they use kids to run county lines, moving drugs from the city to the countryside. So here I am, back to normal. It kills me that I hurt Mum so much. She said it was like I became another person, but she says everything will be okay. But how can it be? I'm scared I'll see them again. You know, I'm trying to put it behind me, but it's always there.
Should we stop it, Becca? Is that all right? Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So in fact, there is another few minutes of the film where we discuss modern slavery, but I think for the times moving on, that we won't do that now. But you can access all the films on our website or through our website, and there's an accompanying resource that goes alongside with them as well. So just to sort of talk a little bit more about county lines. So I think by now it's become clear that it's the dominant form of modern slavery affecting children in the UK. And I think by that we mean affecting UK children, children who are British nationals in the UK. And we know that the sort of average demographic is between 14 and 17 years old. But we also know that there are children as young as 7 that are being groomed. And one of the most interesting pieces of work that we have happening at the moment is with one of the people that we have trained, who's actually providing help for some year 5 and 6 boys in the school and working with them directly, because they're at risk of being drawn into county lines for various reasons. I don't want to talk too much about it on this film because I know that you're recording it, but that was quite a shocking thing for us, that there are actually children that young that are actually in difficulties that we've actually been asked to help. And so yes, it really is real. In 2021, there were 2,053 county line victims referred into the NRM, which is a 23% increase from the year before. And in fact, these referrals accounted for 16% of all the referrals that they were. Interestingly, most of them were for male children, But I guess, you know, if you see some of the sort of visualization of this crime on television, you might get an idea about why that might be, because, you know, the young men riding bikes and, you know, doing young men things in the evenings, whereas women are much more likely to get drawn in as part of a sort of sexual crime as well. So we know there are 1,000 different county lines operating, majority from London, West Midlands and Merseyside, and that they can incorporate multiple forms of exploitation, so coercion, trafficking, child sexual exploitation and gun and knife crime. So it really is quite a serious problem for a community. So young people involved in county lines are victims of criminal exploitation. There is an exemption under the Modern Slavery Act for prosecution of people who are victims, and that exemption would often be used. And it's worth noting that female victims of county lines, who are a much smaller percentage, are much less likely to be discovered, and they often get asked to carry drugs and weapons because they're less likely to be suspected than males. But sadly, for a lot of these female victims, you know, quite a lot of them are also involved in a sort of sexual exploitation that stems from a boyfriend, sort of grooming and relationship, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. Can I hand over to you now, Becca?
Of course, yeah. So we talked right about at the beginning about how actually it can be a little bit overwhelming, and you can think, actually, how does this relate to me? What do I need to do? So we're trying to really kind of hang it into a safeguarding process that people will know already. So I'm going to go kind of briefly through the recognise, respond, record, refer, and then I think we'll have a short break, and then we'll go into a breakout room to think about that. Actually, what can we do? What can we do next? So as I said, you'll get these slides, and we've also got some great posters with signs and symptoms on that you can order through the Clewer website, and you can put up in your churches, in where you're hosting food banks, those sorts of things, social action projects. We've got all sorts of different ones, some aimed at people running projects, and also some aimed at individuals who might be victims themselves, so maybe stuff to put in their bathrooms. So we've divided them into parents, accommodation, travel and seeking help. So these are some of the things that you might see if someone is a victim of modern slavery or human trafficking. And we've got this one on travel and seeking help. And as I said, all these are on posters, and you'll get these slides as well. In terms of vulnerability for victims of modern slavery, often they have undergone trauma, emotional distress. They may well not be trusting of the system. They may have to overcome a language barrier in order to speak out about what's happened to them. And they may also not be familiar with UK rights and systems, particularly around what work should look like. People may well be isolated, very poor, and you're not being paid, or maybe being paid in food or alcohol or drugs, and maybe having a debt to pay back, like Hannah talked about. Lack of stable employment, or any employment other than the modern slavery situation they're being exploited in. Living in overcrowded housing, or lacking housing, and having quite an unknown future. So even once people are in that national referral mechanism poster, we know that the timings for getting any decision made about either they may be initially people get a decision and then they get a conclusive grounds decision does take a long time. So the future for some people is quite unknown. In terms of how to respond, no different to any other safeguarding query that you would come across in the Church of England using their systems and processes. So obviously in an emergency, contact the emergency services and contact your Darstone safeguarding team to let them know. Most Darstone safeguarding teams have out of hours so that you can speak to them, but they also are not an emergency service, so you do need to call 999 as well. If you're not sure how to respond, consulting the DSA and then deciding together whether you need to get some advice, whether you need to make an immediate referral to the police or social care. So letting the DSA know what you're doing. Really important to keep a record of what's happened, and we'll talk about what you need to record. And with any safeguarding concern, you know, we're not telling the whole of the PCC. We are letting people know on a needs to know basis. So the incumbent, the Darson safeguarding advisor, your parish safeguarding officer, rather than the whole group. And really important to always do something. So sometimes it's a bit unclear and we just have a feeling that something doesn't feel right. You know, we've seen that person and actually something doesn't feel right about it. So seeking advice, and all the Darson safeguarding teams that I'm aware of would be much rather that you spoke to them at an early stage and said, actually, this person's turned up to our food bank or our social action project or come to church, doesn't feel right, what do you think we should do about it? They'd much rather have that than you start investigating and come up with concrete answers for them. So do bear that in mind. In terms of recording, we talk about the 4 W's. So what happened, when it happened, who was involved, where did it happen, and what did you do about it, and keeping that somewhere secure. And if you don't have somewhere secure, then passing it on to the PSO or the Darson safeguarding team. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the 4 R's, but I think what's really important, I haven't done refer, that's the very important bit at the end, sorry. So there are lots of agencies as well as your Darson safeguarding team that you can seek advice from, and it may be that you're seeking advice from them and they're going on to, you know, they are the experts in this. We are alerters, not investigators, as we like to say in our diocese. So there are people who are called first responders. So not everybody can refer into the national referral mechanism. You need to be a first responder, and really the go-to first responders are the police and social care, and also the modern slavery helpline, and we've got information on them at the end. So those are the kind of go-to. The Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority are really worth mentioning because they're a great organisation that can go into a setting where there are concerns, but we haven't got maybe any identifying details of an individual, but maybe we go to a car wash and we're concerned. You can also report through the app as well, or maybe you go to a takeaway and get a curry or something, and you're concerned about the workers and how they're being treated. You're not sure if it's modern slavery or not. Again, not your role to diagnose, your role to pass things on, and they can then go out to that workplace and they can do an investigation and they can safeguard people in that way. So they're really useful to know about. So let's have a short